Greetings Simmers, history lovers, and curious tourists. We are making the family of Henry I of England, and we already talked about him in the previous video on William the Conqueror, so I'm just going to get right into it and keep it kind of short. Henry was the youngest son and possibly youngest child of William the Conqueror and Matilda of Flanders. Henry took over the throne after his brother William died in the year 1100, basically usurping the right of his older brother Robert. They had a few scuffles about it. Henry wound up winning.
Hey, are you okay?
I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah?
I don't want to talk about it.
Henry also took over, if not the title, the technical rule of the Duchy of Normandy, which was also in control of his brother Robert, and he refrained from using the title Duke of Normandy because he couldn't technically take it away from Robert, but he had imprisoned his brother and effectively banished his nephew, so he was really the Duke of Normandy, even though he said he was just maintaining order in a chaotic duchy.
Oh, boy.
He maintained a reputation for being very generous to those who demonstrated their loyalty to him, but if you crossed him, he was merciless. During his younger years, there was a rebellion against his brother Robert that he actually came to Robert's defense, and during the fight, he threw a man off the top of the battlements to his death, even though he had surrendered and was pleading for mercy, but he'd rebelled against his liege and lord, so William was like, no, you can't be trusted. Bam. Cold-blooded, but effective. And that is our quick recap of Henry I.
Just another tyrant.
Matilda of Scotland. Matilda was originally christened Edith, but she took the name Matilda when she became Queen of England upon marrying Henry, but before then she was known as Edith of Scotland. But in our game, for The Sims, they don't let you have middle name stuff, so I named her Matilda because that is the name she was known as Queen. Matilda was born in 1080 in Dunfermline? Sorry, Scotland. I'll put it on the screen. She was born in 1080 in this word, Scotland. Her parents were Malcolm III, King of Scotland, and Margaret of Wessex, later Saint Margaret. So she was christened Edith, and at her baptism, Henry's older brother, Robert Curthose, was her godfather, and his mother, Matilda of Flanders, who at that point was Queen of England, stood as the godmother. And apparently, little baby Matilda reached up and pulled the older Queen Matilda's headdress off, and everybody said that that was a sign that she would one day be queen.
I'm royalty.
Because their mother was Margaret of Wessex, they are directly descended from previous ruling house of England, so the House of Wessex. So she's a native English princess in that regard, and she's also Scottish royalty. It's not been that long since William the Conqueror, did the conquering, and the Norman elite are still not very popular, and they're definitely not English or seen as English by the people at large, who are still pretty loyal to the House of Wessex. So Henry marrying Matilda is a pretty smart move, and she apparently really liked the idea of the status that came with being Queen of England. It is said that he had always admired her character, but who knows. Henry also was notorious philanderer. He had something like 22 illegitimate children, but him and Matilda did have a good marriage, and they seem to have had a lot of respect for each other. They only had 2 children, as opposed to the 22.
I wanted so many kids.
Told him shop closed after 2.
Okay, so as queen, she also had an interest in architecture. Her education had been very good. She had learned how to speak French, Latin, English, possibly learned geometry, which I think probably she did because she was so interested in architecture, and that kind of ties right into it. She was a smart lass. She was renowned for her love of books, and she was renowned for her generosity towards the church and her piety. She was basically the ideal queen of the time. She had quite a lot of income, and so she used that to have a lot of more Norman-style buildings created, including Waltham Abbey, the Holy Trinity at Aldgate. Sorry if I'm saying any of these wrong. And after her entourage had problems crossing the River Lee, she built the first arched bridge in England. I love the idea of a queen being like, this is so inefficient, let's fix the highways, and then just paying for it. How nice. So yeah, girl liked a nice archway. She enjoyed a building made of stone. She had refined tastes. She died on the 1st of May, 1118. Henry asked for her to be buried at Westminster Abbey so that she could be buried near Edward the Confessor. And he had the inscription on her tomb read, "Here lies the renowned Queen Matilda II, excelling both young and old of her day. She was for everyone the benchmark of morals and the ornament of life." Oh, it's kind of sweet. Aww, look at that. He had pretty words put about her on her tombstone. But you regret stepping out now, don't you? The reputation of Queen Matilda took a bit of a hit during the reign of her nephew Stephen of Louvain, because he insisted that when she'd been educated at that abbey, that she'd actually been a nun, and therefore her children weren't legitimate. Another reason to hate Stephen. Ugh. But that had come up when she was wanting to get married to Henry in the first place, and Matilda literally went to court and was like, "Nope, didn't happen. I am not a nun. I refused." And they agreed, and they let her get married. So I don't know why Stephen had to keep hashing that up, but he did, because Stephen is the literal worst. But we'll get to him. Ugh, I hate Stephen. Her reputation did considerably improve, though, during the reign of her grandson Henry II, but she was remembered continuously less and less as, the centuries went on. Fun fact, I have no proof for this, but I have a suspicion that in the Game of Thrones series, Good Queen Alysanne, I think was based off of Matilda, Good Queen Maud. Respect to our girl. And that is Matilda of Scotland.
For I am queen.
Alright, Matilda of England, also known as Empress Maud, the Holy Roman Empress, the Countess of Anjou, and later, the Lady of the English. That's a lot of titles, so in The Sims, I only called her Matilda, Lady of the English, because that is the title that I feel like she most deserved and was the most, scorned for, and it's not fair. She should have been Queen of the English, or King of the English, or whatever, but I'll take Lady of the English, and I'm really mad about this, but you're gonna understand more about it in our next Greatest Sim video, because then we're gonna talk about the anarchy between her and Stephen, and I can finally get it out of my system, so I'm just gonna calm it down, and let's just talk about Matilda's early life. Alright, she was obviously one of the claimants to the English throne during the Civil War, known as the Anarchy, which is a top-notch A+ name. Thank you, historians, for finally getting something right and giving us a wonderful name. So, the Anarchy. But before then, she was just Matilda of England. There is no description of Matilda's appearance. Contemporaries said that she was very beautiful, but that might have just been flattery. So I just went with what I went with. There is a picture of her that I glanced at, and then I promptly ignored. So I just made her how I wanted to make her, using the genetics of the Sims I'd already made. Woohoo!
Council has made a decision. Given that it's a stupid-ass decision, I've elected to ignore it.
So, Matilda was born possibly around the 7th of February, which means her birthday is coming up. Happy birthday, Maud. 1102 at Sutton Courtenay. Oh, whatever. She was born. There we have it. We don't know a lot about her early life, but she probably stayed with her mother and was taught to read. In late 1108, or early 1109, not sure, King Heinrich V of Germany proposed to marry Matilda, who, by the way, was 7 years old. But we're gonna ignore that. It was seen as a really good match, so they agreed. She left England in 1110 to make her way to Germany when she was 8 years old, and she was put into the custody of Bruno. We don't talk about Bruno. The Archbishop of Trier, who educated her in German culture, manners, and government. So she lives in Germany from the age of 8 to 23. She's pretty much just German. Yeah, that's a trend that's going to keep going with the English royalty. It's nice to see we started those traditions early. Is anyone even English, whoever sits on that thing?
William the Conqueror, Henry VIII.
Untrue. Go on.
Edward the Confessor.
Correct.
So through her marriage and through being crowned, she becomes the Queen of the Romans. And she also becomes the Holy Roman Empress, but not everyone is sure if that's actually what happened because the Pope who crowned them winds up being excommunicated and all this stuff. But she continues to use the title of Empress for the rest of her life, regardless of being remarried. Nobody makes a fuss over calling her Empress Matilda, but they do make a fuss over calling her Queen of England or Lady of the English or Duchess of Normandy, but nobody has a problem with her being the Holy Roman Empress, apparently. Heinrich, who ends up dying on the 23rd of May in 1125, and Matilda is left with no children. So with him dead, she really has only two choices, which is to get remarried or to become a nun. And like her mother, the habit life ain't for her. So she is 23 now, and she goes back to England. And that is where the story really gets started. Her father has no heir except for her, so he makes all of the nobles swear an oath of loyalty, even his queen, to her, so that when he dies, she will be the next ruler of England. And they all swear it, and she is proclaimed as his heir. He then goes about to arrange her marriage, or her second marriage. He decides that she's going to marry Geoffrey, the Count of Anjou, and he arranges the marriage. Geoffrey is quite a bit younger than her, not drastically. It's less than 10 years, I think, but he's young enough that it's a bit awkward. And also, he's a count, and Matilda has been an empress, and she sees him as far below her. She's not a fan, and she is not agreeing to it. She is eventually persuaded to accept the marriage, and she goes to Anjou, leaving the succession question both settled and up in the air.
So am I the queen?
William Adelin, I think is how you say it. Adelin is apparently the Latinized version of Atheling, or Atheling, which is the Old English word for any male member of the royal family who has a right to inherit the throne. He is born in Winchester, Hampshire, England, and he was the hope for the succession. He is the child of Henry and his wife Matilda. He is completely legitimate, and according to Henry of Huntingdon, oh yeah, he was contemporary, he was, end quote, a prince so pampered that he seemed destined to be food for the fire. Apparently our boy William was quite spoiled. During Henry I's lifetime, he made his son William Duke of Normandy because he didn't want to have to give homage to the King of France. Plus, he got the title in a very sketchy way, imprisoning his brother, banishing his nephew, da-da-da-da. This was just kind of a way to smooth over all tensions, but in practice, Henry was definitely the one still ruling Normandy. He didn't give up power that easily. William didn't seem to care. At least, he didn't fight his dad about it. And he's being prepared to be the next king, and he's doing great. You're doing amazing, sweetie. But then, the White Ship tragedy. On the evening of the 25th of November, 1120, returning from Normandy to England, William chose to sail aboard the White Ship, the fastest of all the ships in the fleet, and subsequently drowned when the ship sank in the English Channel because they were actually celebrating his wedding. His wife was on a ship with his father, and they were headed to England, and their ship had already left. And William and his friends were going to be on the White Ship, and they figured since they had the faster ship, they might as well have some fun, party, celebrate a little bit longer on the beach, get drunk, and then set out. And then, sadly, the drunken helmsman, because apparently the crew were in on the partying too, rammed the ship into a rock. Titanic moment there. The crew and passengers couldn't get the ship off the rock, and it started to fill with water, and William and his friends managed to launch a life dinghy. He is, at this point, Rose from the Titanic. They got to be in a life raft. They made it! And at that last minute, William jumped back on board and went back to rescue, this is very sweet, his illegitimate half-sister, Matilda Fitzroy. There are so many Matildas, but anyways, he went back to save her. But when they jumped back into the lifeboat, it tipped over, and they sank. They all drowned, all of them. William is dead, and the heir to the throne is gone. This once secure succession and kingdom and bright future is gone and dead, and nobody knows what to do. It's a succession crisis, and it's looming on the horizon, and everyone can see it coming. It's like this horrible, ominous sense of, even though we are going to try to avoid it, we know we can't. And they won't. But poor William, he was only 17 years old when he died. That was the White Ship tragedy, and that was the loss of our bonny Prince William.
How about that Titanic song? Oh, no, not a...
And now we have another Matilda, Matilda of Anjou. But, according to Wikipedia, she was also called Matilda of Anjou. So I named her that in the Sims Create a Sim thingy, because I did not want to have so many people named Matilda in one family tree. But technically, her name was Matilda, and that's what I'm going to call her in the voiceover, but that's not what she's named in the game. Just so you know. She was the daughter of the Count of Anjou, and his first wife. There's a lot of second wives and marriages happening around here. And she was his firstborn child, I think, and was the older sister of Geoffrey, who winds up becoming Empress Matilda's second husband. Also Sibylla, Countess of Flanders, who marries Henry I's nephew and rival for the County of Normandy. She's also the older sister of Elias, the Count of Maine, and she's the older half-sister of both King Baldwin III of Jerusalem and King Amalric of Jerusalem through her father's second marriage. So she is well connected. And her marriage was a part of a peace treaty between her father and Henry. So they married William Adelin and Matilda of Anjou in 1119. And then the tragedy of the White Ship happens, as we talked about. She survives because she's not on board the ship. She's on a different ship with her father-in-law. And he's dead. He died, they had no children, and she's now a widow, and there's no heir to the throne. Her father demanded that her dowry be returned, and Henry refused. Because, of course, Henry refused.
How about yes? How about no? I'd rather you say yes. Yes, no.
Her father countered by marrying her sister to William's nephew and rival. You know, great family relations. But after her husband's death, Henry said that Matilda could stay at his court, and she did. And she was treated as one of the king's daughters, and she was, lived very well, apparently. And he maintained that she could stay as long as she wanted. And she remained in England for several years, unmarried. And then she returned to Anjou on a visit, apparently. And then while she was there, Geoffrey, Bishop of Chartreuse, gave her some advice, and she took vows at the Fontevraud Abbey as a nun. She became the abbess in 1150, and she died in 1154, 26 years later. So, wow. I think she probably was like, I've had enough with, politics, and there's only a matter of time before I have to get married again. Let's be a nun. Her and Cecilia. They knew what they were doing.
Nothing is working! Send in the nuns!
Eliza of Louvain was the second wife of Henry of England. She was the daughter of Godfrey, Count of Louvain, and his first wife, Ida, and she was Queen of England from 1121 to 1135. Eliza was, renowned for her beauty, and I did my best in The Sims. I tried to look up what the beauty standards were for the 12th century. I couldn't find anything, really, except that, hey, if you were rich, you probably weren't bone skinny. So I just kind of did whatever. I think she turned out okay. I think she looks kind of nice. I realized they made her kind of pale, but I figured she's a highborn lady and a queen. Maybe she doesn't go outside much? I don't know. She apparently was called the Fair Maiden of Brabant. And Henry of Huntingdon, who just seems to be everywhere making comments these days, mentions her beauty, and he wrote, "A jewel grows pale on you, a crown does not shine. Put adornment aside, for nature provides your adornment." Goals. Can we please start writing nice things about people like that again? If you want to flirt with someone, flirt with me like that. Flatter me. That is, chef's kiss. 10 out of 10. Well done to the chronicler. I approve. Also, besides being beautiful, Henry was also attracted to the fact that she was a descendant of Charlemagne, because politics and marriage must be one and the same. They may have been planning to get married even when she was as young as 16, before William's death, but after William died, Henry needed another male heir, and so they sped up the marriage. They were married on the 24th of January, 1121. Henry was 35 years older than Adeliza, and she was about 18 when they married. Oh, the things that should be illegal.
That is not okay.
Not okay. Not okay.
Okay, this is not normal.
But regardless of that horrifying aspect, it was a different time. They seemed to have gotten along pretty well and had a very strong marriage. They were constantly together, probably so that they could have a kid, but they never did. Since they had no children, he was even more determined to make Empress Matilda his heir. So Adeliza had a very passive role in politics. She mostly just focused on promoting the arts, especially French literature. She swears an oath of loyalty to Matilda, just like everyone else, and that's that. Then Henry dies. After his death, she spends 3 years in a convent, during which time Stephen proclaims himself king. Ugh, Stephen. 3 years after that, she gets married again to William, whose last name I'm not even going to try to say. Oh, yes, I am. D'Aubigny. William. She marries a man named William, who was one of Henry's advisors. They live in her castle of Arundel on the Sussex coast, and they have 7 children. Eliza, William, Olivia, Rainer, Geoffrey, Henry, and Agatha. Dang. There's not a lot known about her relationship with her stepdaughter Matilda. However, when Matilda is fighting Stephen for the throne, there is a time where she is sheltered by Adeliza in her home at Arundel, along with her half-brother Robert, the Earl of Gloucester. And this is against the wishes of her second husband, who was a staunch supporter of King Stephen. Politics pulling families apart since 1127. The house is Adeliza's, not his, so she did it. But she winds up betraying them and handing them over when King Stephen besieges the castle. Some people have tried to explain this action. For example, John of Worcester. He's got the same name as the sauce. John of Worcester. There's a guy named John who suggests that she, end quote, feared the king's majesty and worried that she might lose the great estate she held throughout England. Ain't that just like thinking it's all about the money? Petty. No. I mean, maybe. Maybe that's what it was. But honestly, I think she was probably just like, the best way to save our skins, I turn you over and then plead for you to be let go. Because that's what she did. After she hands them over, she then somehow winds up talking to Stephen. And she kind of excuses her actions and she says, end quote, she swore an oath that his enemies had not come to England on her account, aka she didn't invite them, but that she had simply given them hospitality as persons of high dignity once close to her. Basically, she's like, friends came a knocking at the door, and I opened it. And then she makes an appeal to Stephen to permit Matilda and Robert to leave and go to Bristol. And he agrees. I don't know why he agrees. He has Matilda in his clutches. He has his, only opponent. And then Adeliza asks nicely for him to let her go. And he does, which is why I don't think it was just about the money. It doesn't. The facts don't line up. Stop thinking so simple. Expand your horizons. Think outside the box, ancient historians. Lazy.
Balls!
But yeah, in her later life, Adeliza just kind of faded into obscurity as far as the record's concerned. We do know that in 1150, a year before her death, she left her husband to go live in a monastery in Flanders, and she died there in 1151. Where she is buried is unknown. Some say that she might have been buried at the monastery, but we don't really know where she was buried. So if you want to visit the grave of Queen Adeliza, you can't. Not unless you are a really, really good investigator. So Indiana Jones, get on it.
Indiana Jones?
Hey, what's with the strange breed? They is my family.
My dad is cold-blooded. He's my hero.
What am I doing here?
What am I doing here? What am I doing here? What am I doing here?
What am I doing here?
Kneel.
Beg your pardon.
Kneel before your queen.
What shall we have? The holly or each other?
Don't make jokes. You're bad at it.
Tower of London.
The Tower of London.
The Tower of London.
Tower of London.
In the Tower of Bloody London.
Put him in the Tower of London.
The Tower of London.